Hi folks and welcome to the Film Milk channel. I'm in the woods again. I've been pissing it down pretty much, and but I thought I'd give you my 5 cents on a knife. I find I don't like the term ultimate bushcraft knife. It isn't the ultimate bushcraft knife, but it is a pretty decent one, which I can hugely recommend. And I must say that I don't get paid to say this. I'm just a big fan of the cooperation, just as I am with, say, other Swiss brands. This is a Swedish brand, Morakniv, and they are situated in Mora in Dalarnas. And the Kansbol is a little bit fallen to the back of the attention with the bushcraft crowd recently because of the new releases of Mora, namely the Riesberg and Amberg, which I would love to peruse and give you my thoughts about, and I dare say they are awesome. Only I can't afford them at the moment, so this has to wait. On the other hand, the Kansbol is none too shabby either, and I am also a big fan of the Gorberg for more heavy-duty stuff, since it is a full-tang knife with a thicker blade, and to me it's the most reliable knife, or one of the most reliable knives I own. But on the other hand, the Kansbol, which you can see here, is maybe the better alternative if you are into stuff that, for instance, I like to do in the forest, namely carving, foraging, foot prep, general camp chores and something. And I think the Kansbol is more than enough. It comes with a blade that is not too thick, and it's just 5 millimeters or something, and it has a sort of a duplex grind, with the tip being round thinner. This translates to smaller thickness above the edge at the tip, and at first I was a little bit taken aback by the concept, because I tended to use the hind part of the blade for finer stuff, such as feather sticking or stuff like that, but there's no mistaking the fact that this makes sense, so much in fact that this has quickly become my favorite knife also in the kitchen. And this tells a story, because it is suited for some pretty heavy use in the bush, and but it's also a really decent kitchen knife. With Scandi grinds, you often have the sensation that hard greens like carrots or say celery or potatoes or something are split rather than cut, and you don't get that with the Kansbol. It just sails through the greens. And talking of which, this is pretty seasoned hazel, and even though I need to start a base first, and you can see it that it's pretty much sailing through the wood. That's not exactly soft, and also the knife, while it isn't suited for heavy battening all the time, it works for some time. And I would recommend you would whittle yourself some sort of blood or wedge if you want to do really heavy splitting with this knife. But it can be done for some time. If you're in an absolute pinch, and personally I do not believe there is a situation where you need to split heavy logs in a survival situation, and even less so in common camping or bushcraft scenarios. So I don't believe in battening. That's all. I cannot see why you should use a knife for a chore a throw or an axe would be designed for, and compromise your cutting ability for splitting competence, which, well, this is not what you do most of the time. Most of the time you want something that's slicey and does fine shavings, is precise in carving your camp utensils, and if you're a hunter, even more so, since you don't want to mutilate the piece, you want to skin and cut, and this is pretty precise. And for skinning, you can easily take it this way, and it's great in preparing meat and processing meat. Well, the tang, and I checked with a magnet, is reaching about that far. You can go to the Mora website where you can see the tang layouts of all the knives, which is morakniv.se or morakniv.com, and you can find the tang layouts of the knives there, or you can ask. I also recommend the Mora forums, where there generally is a lot of information around, and actually the blade is pretty flexible, as you can see, and for some this is something that's bad. They want a stiff and huge and big blade, which isn't necessarily more robust. Most of the time it is, but not necessarily so, because if you look at the branch on a tree, you see that it tapers and it's flexible, and it is durable because it flexes. And in engineering, this is called bearings of equal load, because the tip, because of the flex, can take the same load as the thicker part at the stem. So it is more durable, in fact, than if it were the same diameter, because you got this drastic angle at the stem. So a flexible blade can be, not necessarily so, can be, if the temper is spot on, more durable than a stiffer blade. As I said, this depends pretty much on the heat treatment, and the heat treatment on Moras is typically spot on. Never broke a Mora, and I don't think, if you don't abuse the knife, this will happen at all. And prying and battening is abuse, and it's not what a knife is made for. The knife comes in thermoplastics sheath, which is pretty decent when it's new, but it gets loose with time. You could recreate the snap if you maybe put it into boiling water, put the knife in, and then carefully with a soft cloth form it back around the blade again. The sheath comes with a replaceable belt loop. I won't do this, and this is the survival version, which comes with a fire steel. The fire steel also snaps in, which is pretty convenient, and you just turn it and you can remove it. The spine on the Kanzbul is obviously sharpened and works a cinch with a fire steel, and also on the carrier, which can be added to other sheaths of this layout too, namely the Gorbei and I think the 2000 comes with a similar sheath, and the Kanzbul. And also on there is some sort of diamond. Well, it's called a hone, but it's got a pretty coarse grit. So I like to carry Belgian stone, sharpening stone, with me, or strop it at home, or use a leather belt to put the burr on the edge into the middle again. And the blade typically arrives rather sharp, and I can tell you I once worked for Cillian SE, who also specialized in Mora Kniv. It was before the fusion, and Gunnar, if you see this, greetings to you. It was a really great time. I wasn't a regular employee, with just helped out on the expo in the vicinity. But when I was working there, I was using a 2000 from the similar steel, 12C27 that is, the entire day for demonstrational purposes to chop antler and cut paper. And after some 6 to 7 hours of doing so, the blade developed burr. Not a dent, not a chipping, but a burr. And that was that special knife, and obviously this is gross abuse, and I don't recommend you do this, because, well, obviously, just like batoning and prying, it also voids the warranty. But it tells a story about the heat treatment at Moras. The blade comes in at an estimated temper of 57.5 to 58, and as I said, the temper is spot on. This special knife I flexed to 15 degrees in a vise, and it came out straight and true. No, I also do not recommend you do this, but I want to say this is, even though it has a thin blade, it is pretty resilient. And this is what I want to say. Maybe we should ask ourselves, what is it that we do in the forest? What is it that enhances the quality of our experience in the forest? And to me, it is, as I said, whittling, carving, what have you, and foraging, food prepping, snacking, going out on a bimble, watching wildlife, visiting interesting trees, looking for plants, and learning to know new knowledge in the forest, and experimenting with techniques from history. And for all this, a knife with a really thick spine and a really durable survival layout is, well, it does work, but not necessarily better than something like this. There's a reason that I reverted to pocket knives in the past more and more, because they are convenient to carry. They are they are pretty versatile, as I said, and they are slicey. And this is something that I value more than brute strength, and that's for me. And what I just want to say is, don't believe everything you see on YouTube or on the internet, and that you absolutely need to have a big special forces survival knife. Military survival is not the same as bushcraft or camping. And often you hear people using, well, that's a camper, as an insult or a derogative term. But hey, why? If someone's piece of cake is more like camping, why should you? That's just a description. It's not something that you. Well, if you are a tough guy, well, you're a tough guy. You don't need to brag about it. If you can dump yourself into ice cold water, well, then dump yourself into ice cold water. And if you can walk 85 kilometers per day, well, kudos, hats off to you, chapeau. But if your piece of cake is just bimbling around, having a flask of tea and some cookies on a Sunday and whittling yourself a little whimsical gnome, why should anyone make fun of that? Because, well, I challenge every survivalist to whittle a nice and whimsical gnome with his survival knife, and the other way around, obviously, too. And if you are just some hobbits bimbling around the local woods, you won't be the greatest guy in a special forces training, but that's comparing apples and pears, because it's not sensible, is what I want to say. So this is something that's catering for the in-betweens, and it can do both. It can be pretty useful in the kitchen, it can be pretty useful on a little hike, and it also can be useful in a survival scenario. Always keeping in mind that in most cases survival means keep moving and not building yourself a shelter to live in for months, because in most realistic survival scenarios you're getting lost, you break your ankle in the woods, you even if it were a nuclear emergency or something, keep your ass out of the survival situation. That's everyone will tell you. And get to where you can get help, go to where you can get cooperation. That zombie apocalypse isn't going to happen. It is not, or if it's going to happen, you need to find people to side with, to cooperate with, because mankind didn't survive 2.6 million years by being the lone wolf. Not going to happen to survive as a lone wolf. And so that has consequences also for your gear, because, well, we are weighing ourselves down, and we are thinking primarily about weapons and armor, but there are wild pigs in this forest. And when I'm going home from my obligations and my which I have to fulfill, and have to keep it short now, and say a wild pig would attack me, this isn't going to help me in any way. It's not a self-defense weapon against a wild pig, and I don't want to stick any piece of metal in my fellow human beings, because that's a myth. That's nothing romantic, and it's not And I think we need to stop that, because knives that are designed for stuff like that typically don't work. They simply do not work as knives anymore. They are just some pointy shrapnel only designed to inflict pain or terror or what have you. And I don't want to think along these lines. And before you are starting in the comment section to get mad at me for that, because well, what would you say if some terrorist would try to rape your woman or what have you, and what would you do then? Or of course I would try to defend myself or my loved ones. Of course I would. Everyone would. But you wouldn't believe how effective a common broom is against a knife attacker. Especially if you have several people with brooms. And you put that guy nicely and snugly into a corner, and he can wave around his blade as much as you would like. You don't hurt him, he doesn't hurt you. You lean on your broomstick and use the brooms to keep him in a corner. And if 5 people do this and push him into a corner, and one calls the police or what have you, assistance, this is surprisingly effective and has been proven to be more effective than going all in with maybe a tiny knife with no reach. There's a reason people develop pole arms. There's a reason why people developed body armor, and a knife fight isn't romantic at all. And as I said, the knives that are catering to these needs simply don't work for common sense practices like preparing food and camping and whittling something. And so I think we got it back to front. So that said, this is a huge recommendation because this is a really sensible design that works as a knife, not as a pry bar. And if you want to enhance your experience, you might want to give it a go, because, well, it's even if it doesn't work for you in the woods, it would in the kitchen. So no harm done. And so if you also, it's not the most expensive there is, and for that price it's a huge recommendation of mine, one of my favorite bushcraft knives. So that said, I hope that was halfway helpful and informative, and well, hope you find some time in the woods and whittle yourself something. Stay sane and healthy as usual, and I really hope to see you soon. Bye.